Okay, so today we're going to be discussing benchmarks and where to incorporate benchmarks when you're looking at improving your business. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to say, just in kind of opening up this conversation, is that based on all of the customers that I've dealt with and hundreds of contractors I've dealt with, fewer than 2% actually benchmark or have used data to run their business. Okay. And it's a sort of a flashy word that gets thrown around a lot. And I like to make it really, really practical and sensible on how we use numbers to manage our business. All right. So, what benchmarking allows us to do is measure the growth in different areas of the business that we're looking to improve. All right. And it's a simple principle. We cannot manage what you cannot measure. All right. So, no matter what processes or systems in place that you want to put at, if you can't effectively measure each one of those, all right, and what it's supposed to improve, you're going to find that your implementation will fail. You'll most likely not get the return on your investment for that process, and it may be the right process, but at the wrong time. Okay, so where I'm going to try and bring benchmarking into the group after all of the other trainings is understanding, how we can look at the big picture of our business almost entirely through the numbers. Okay. But before I get into that, I want to discuss kind of something that's really important in order to get the value from this conversation, is understanding again, I know from dealing with many, many contractors, nobody likes accounting. No one likes, there's nothing sexy about, management accounting systems or anything else like that. We have to really understand our why. Okay. This plays a lot into our vision. In order for us to feel motivated to do some of these things, which are hard and outside of our comfort level, we have to really be clear on what's the vision of the company and what's the direction that it's taking me. Okay. So the best way that I've been able to come up with, making this easy to digest. All right. Because some of the things we're introducing, I mean, I've talked to full-blown management accountants or CPAs that have no idea, like flex budgets, they're lost, right? Like it's way over their head. And here I am trying to introduce it to contractors that don't even like to give their receipts to accountants or bookkeepers, right? So I realize the extent of this, but where things start to change for you is predicting your future. Okay. A lot of us have this big dream in our head, this big vision of running a company successfully, that doesn't involve your time and having real freedom, right? I don't think anyone on the call is looking for less freedom and less money, right? Okay. So the only way that you're ever going to achieve that, all right, is that we have to get to a certain stage in our business where we can see what's going on inside of it without ever having to engage with anybody that's running the business. Right? Pretty tough. So think about the way that you guys manage your problems now and how you put your fires out. Okay. Every day, I'm sure we're all putting fires out. We're all attending to things. We're all spending our time doing things that we think are for the survival of the business. All right. You reach a certain point where you realize that all of those things that you're doing a lot of the time aren't really bringing value to the business. All right, including putting out those fires. I had this conversation this week with a sales rep that felt it was really necessary for him to drop everything and run up and deliver material to finish a job. Okay. And to most owners, they would do the same. All right. They would do the exact same thing in the same situation. All right. And I'm sure all of you guys would in the pinch. Where it becomes, sort of strategic here is that we have to understand, first of all, the value of our time. Okay. Hopefully you guys have maybe done something like this before, but step one is really knowing how much it costs you by the hour to do anything. How many of you guys have ever calculated the value of your time? Anyone? No? Okay. So how would you know that the equity in your knowledge and this time that you're spending with me, for example, is raising your hourly rate or lowering it? You wouldn't, right? So the first thing I'm going to offer to you guys is a way of calculating how much you're worth an hour and how it compares to the rest of the market. Okay. So a general contractor, for example, All right. And this is just benchmark standards, like just being a general contractor at a reasonable rate with all of the expenses that come with, that your vehicle, like you, the person, all right, is typically worth about $125 an hour. Okay. Meaning that I could hire you if we added up all of your expenses, just like we would do job costing and labor burden, but a little bit differently in terms of adding in overhead rates and what the value of an interruption is worth. Okay. All right. We start to see a really, really important thing here. Is most of the time our businesses aren't growing because we're not spending our time doing the things that matter. Okay. The things that financially matter. All right. So if we're avoiding things like job costing, if we're avoiding things like improving, our systems, all right, most of the time it's because we can't see the value that it's bringing us. All right. And it's a very hard thing to kind of explain and visualize. So I'm going to do my best. All right. Um, when I did this, I realized that my time, even right now, not being involved in the business is about $400 an hour. If I added up all the expenses, okay, my sales rep, making 400K, his time's worth about $220 an hour. All right. So for him to drop what he was doing and drive, to deliver the material, no matter what, no matter which way you slice it, all right, we were losing roughly $150 an hour every hour that he was doing it. Okay. Now take this into your own situation and start to understand. All right. The better you get at what you do, or the better you become at marketing, for example, better you become at sales, this number goes up. All right. And they can get into the multiples of thousands per hour. All right. And this is where we start to realize that we don't want to trade our time for dollars. Okay. Your whole objective and the way you find freedom in your business, all right, is to move well beyond what your time is worth. All right. And start to look at every moving piece in your business as what their time is worth. Does that make any sense?
Yep.
Okay. So this is sort of the first pillar in understanding and benchmarking your numbers. All right. The first number you need to benchmark is the value of your time. Okay. Now, there's going to be times when you absolutely need to go put off, of course, but it's better you understand the loss and feel the pain of that loss from the number, all right, than just to forget about it and keep doing it. All right. Only when we can measure something and feel the true impact that it's having can we actually find the motivation to change it. All right. So a good example of this, Nick, if I told you that every time you delivered material to a site, you were losing $550, would you find a solution to resolve that and make that cheaper?
Yeah.
Of
Yeah. I would get
course.
a labor.
Perfect. So, but if someone didn't tell you that and you didn't know for sure by the numbers, would you think it was that severe?
No, no, not
Right.
never like that. I know it was not worth it, but not
Right.
that severe.
Right. So, but then you would be doomed to repeat the same thing over and over again, right?
Yeah.
All right. So then what if I told you if you filled your time with enough of those low volume, low like um costs, if you were constantly performing, let's say 70% of your time was performing a task that was only worth $25 an hour. Not hard to see the problem there, is it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So when we think about this, we want to start to really compartmentalize the things because that's what helps you to see the next role. That's what helps you to understand where your time is most important and where you have the biggest impact on your business. Okay. And what most of you guys will find at this stage is that the only place you can get a high return is in your sales. All right. No one here is a world-class marketer yet, right? And most of you would actually be probably less valued there. But in sales is one of the quickest ways to improve the return on investment in your business, right? It's the quickest way to get your hourly rate up. And I challenge you all to try it, right? There's a maximum dollar figure that you can put to running and operating your business. Okay. So for example, our operations manager, all right, the highest his value will ever be is around 150, 175 an hour. And I mean, he's bringing home 200,000 a year. Okay. So what's that tell you? Meanwhile, I have a sales rep that is substantially above that, right? And again, two different roles. My hourly rate is above that, right? So when we start to figure these things out, now we can start to know which pieces need to be moved. Okay. And this feeds into some other things. So let's go through a couple of other key things to keep in mind. hold on a sec. Pull my thing up. We're going to go through today each area of the business that we would want to be looking at and making improvements in. Okay. So how many of you guys have tried to implement something and it failed? And there's no logical reason in your mind that it failed. Has anyone ever had that experience? Where you tried really, really hard, tried to put something in place, and then, for no reason at all, or you got it in place and then you just stopped doing it? If anyone had that experience where you're like, yeah, I used to do that and I was so dedicated to it, then I just stopped out of nowhere. I hear it all the time about like job costing and stuff as an example, right? I'm like, he was doing job costing, but why? Like, why did it just stop out of nowhere? It's because you couldn't see the actual impact and the value that that task was having. All right. Is the financial number or whatever is the motivating factor, it was removed. Okay. So a lot of the times the things that make us the most money are not the things that are out in the open or the things that we feel pressure to do. Would anyone agree with me on that? Yeah. Okay. And this can go for staff. I teach my staff these things. We know the value of their time. So again, I encourage everyone to make sure that everybody knows, what their value is, and encourage them to increase that hourly rate. People might say I'm crazy. Well, why would you do that? Well, for very obvious reasons. All right. If I didn't have the conversation with my sales rep yesterday about that, which he knew, and we've had conversations before, that mistake would continuously get repeated over and over and over again at a loss. And then I would sit back and go, well, why are all these numbers falling? Why is our profitability gone down? Why is, our morale gone down? Why are people quitting? All right. It's very easy to figure out. I'm putting somebody in a position, whether they agreed to do it or not, I'm putting them in something below their pay grade. All right. Meaning that I'm forcing them to sell their time on behalf of the business for less than what it's worth. All right. That's bad business, is it not? Bad business practices. Okay. So, and we had this conversation with Nick today about on his job costs when he has to do something. For example, I'm just going to use this as the example, Nick, because it's fresh in my mind. But
Yep.
if you have let's say we were using the site setup. All right. The site setup requires a job cost code of a laborer, correct? Right. So
Yeah.
you're not going to pay somebody $75 an hour to go lay floor protection. You're going to pay somebody 25 to 30 bucks an hour, right?
Yeah.
So on the job cost and on the estimate, you may use that cost code of the general labor. But if you have to go do it, it's important that you change that cost code to your cost code so that you're showing the loss on the job costing. So that's setting in with you. You know where you lost the money. You lost the money because you went and did something there. All right.
Mhm.
And then what it's going to do over time is it's going to allow you to see the holes that you have in your business. This is a form of benchmarking. This is a form of understanding where problems are coming from and being able to self-diagnose. Okay. A lot of times we can't self-diagnose and therefore we're doomed to kind of repeat the mistake or give up on trying to fix it and just leave things the way they are. All right. Or again, not know the source of where the problem's coming at it and try to throw stuff at it to fix it, hoping in one day it gets fixed. It doesn't work that way. All right. So let's get into the super boring stuff. I'm going to try and go through this really quickly, guys. If anybody wants like more information, what I've done is in the modules, I've broken everything down in really clear, and I'm going to shoot some additional videos so that like, whatever one you're benchmarking for, you can have an understanding. But this is meant to give you the top level view. This is tough stuff. Again, it's hard to digest, so I'm going to do my best. But always, 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 we start our benchmarking in accounting. Can anybody tell me why? Can anybody, even with your own logic, understand why we would start benchmarking accounting?
That's where the money's monitored,
Okay. What's the money mean?
profit or loss.
Right. Where the most amount of data points exist for any business?
Probably in the labor, time
Um,
management.
yeah, it can be argued in the accounting as well. So again, in terms of indicators and KPIs that are kept, and most of them we don't even understand. All right. You're going to find the majority of your indicators and benchmarks are held in your accounting. Okay. Depending on how you are accounting, by the way, this could be, and what I'm going to do here is kind of show you where you can have additional KPIs outside of that, but they all come back down to the financials. It's the base of everything. Okay. If something's not performing, you're going to see it there first, right? Again, if you're using a management accounting system, you will definitely see it there first. That'll be in your job costs, your schedules, in every, every area your red flags should be going up, right? Customer service issue, you're going to see it immediately in, the turnaround of the jobs and customer satisfaction rates, stuff like that, which is going to have a financial impact. Believe me, right? Here's a good example I can share with you. One bad Google review cost us over $120,000 last year. All right, so one bad Google review, which we ended up getting removed, but it was over $120,000 loss. All right, how could I have possibly calculated that? How could I have possibly seen that? Very easy. We seen a dip in the reviews. All right, we can put a calculation on what our average cost to acquire a customer is through a Google campaign, so meaning organic SEO search, and we seen the loss in it, and we were able to match that pattern. Okay, those are the kind of numbers that you see through your financials. Why was it so important and motivating for me to get that removed and fight and argue and bribe and all that? Because I could see how much of an impact it was having. Most business owners can't feel it. And especially as you grow your business, these things are going on around you. They're not immediately affecting you in your face, right? Because we're not looking in the right places, but they're slowly stealing all of your profit. They're slowly stealing all your energy, keeping you stuck in the business, keeping you away from attending to things that are most important. We'll call them distractions, right? Does that make any sense? Okay. So again, I'm not going to go way deep into all of these things. I don't want to have to try and explain what all of these indicators mean, but what you're going to do in these forms is we're going to start off, and for those of you in the program, we kind of go through the numbers that we can track, all right, and we fill out all the areas in yellow, all right. The best is comparison year over year, just like our sales forecast. All right. But if you're going through any of these are the main KPIs that you would that I've come up with that you'd want to track on your customer side. Okay. These are going to be indicators of, bigger issues or problems that you're having. Now, some of you may not have, the ability to track the number of disputed invoices. All right. There's where your CRM comes into play, right? That's where your systems can pick up this data automatically, right? And you'll want to start to look at, right? Can anybody imagine why we'd want to maybe keep our eye on the number of disputed invoices as it relates to customers? Okay. Anybody have yeah, it can be that. It can definitely relate to that. But anybody have a sales team here? Okay. So the fastest way I can see if a sales rep is being honest and dealing with our customers with integrity is the number of disputed invoices. Okay. So what they say and what comes out and how they presented the offer. All right. If my customer feels cheated, all right, there's going to be a dispute in that invoice. All right. If we didn't deliver as promised, disputed invoice. Okay. A lot of the times, again, these are things to monitor, and if you're trying to satisfy a customer and maintain a level of satisfaction, again, imagine the business without you, completely away from you. All right. All of these lead to top indicators. All right. But these are the lower ones that most systems can track for you. All right. If you bake these into your systems now, as you grow, when you see your top five, maybe five KPIs, I only look at 5. All right. I can drill down on all of these and find the problem very quickly. Does that make sense? Okay. I knew this was going to be a quiet conversation. So we're still going to push through here on this. Here's my suggestion to anyone that's going to be using these forms. Anybody in our program, we fill out, some of them for you. Is don't try to go after them all. Don't feel like because you don't have them that you absolutely need to run out and get them. I would be surprised and happy if you guys were tracking 5 to 6 on each page. All right. Don't worry about doing them all. Okay. Where this is going to lead us to is essentially the calculations, right? So again, when we break it all down and we can input this data, this is going to give us a huge leg up on our business. We can do a very thorough understanding as you pull these data points out. Okay. So again, we'll work towards them for those who are in the program. We'll help you to understand them as they go. If you're only just starting out with your systems, no sweat. Okay, these are things that you want to start wrapping your head around and start thinking about in terms of building them into your systems and your processes. Okay. Anybody have any questions so far? Dare I ask? Nick, you're screwing me up, man. You're just like blinking, and I'm like, oh my god.
No,
I
no, it's just
feel like you're gonna
I don't
tap
even
out on
know.
me.
It's like ARFT. I'm just reading. Like I
Yeah.
don't even know. Like
Yeah, I know. And listen, if I had time, I'd go through all of them. In the school thing, I have them all explained, broken down, why they're important, why they're relevant. So don't sweat it. Okay. But honestly, where they lead to is, again, I want to very quickly, if I have a customer service related issue, right? I want to know right away where it's coming from, because there could be when you have a business that has multiple moving parts, you're going to find out very quickly that it's hard to pinpoint without data. Okay, we'll end up making bad assumptions too. A good example is, we may think it's the foreman or the crew member, or it's this, it's that, and all we're doing is basically blindly guessing. All right, that's very expensive. And if you don't fix the problem, all right, by sourcing it back and being able to prove it, you're just making assumptions, and assumptions are expensive. Okay. So this is what it's meant to do. Again, thinking about, operating a business through the numbers, operating a business without using emotions and, being data driven, because the decisions you make when you have the right information in front of you are tremendously better than the ones you'll make from your gut ever. Period. Full stop. Okay.
yeah, that makes sense because yeah, sometimes I have to yeah, same thing. There's a recurring problems, but I don't have data to back it up, and
Totally.
then I
So,
even like I know what it is and I forget about it. Next job I bring it. Oh yeah, it's this,
right.
and then
And
I
then
got nothing to back it
we're
up.
doomed to repeat the process. This is where a lot of contractors remain stuck. Okay. So I can't tell you how many times, and I went through this for over a decade of, like, we're at 1, 2, 3 million, $4 million, and I can't break through the ceiling. Everything's going right, but why can't I? Well, systems would break down, processes would break down, like, and until I started to really, drink the Kool-Aid and understand that, hey, everything has a root cause. All right. It shouldn't take me an investigation in a wild risk and a witch hunt to be proven about my gut instincts aren't always right. You know what I mean? So again, I'll give you a very good example, a very painful example of it. Probably one of the better project managers that I had. All right, while I was growing, he was with us for about 5 or 6 years. Very diligent, very good at doing his job. I had no way of proving it. I had no way of knowing in my mind. And at the time, I had another project manager that was a little bit more charismatic than he was, a lot more better at getting in my head and, manipulating and, and I've told you the story, I think, a few times about he was stealing from us the whole time. But I fell for that hook, line, and sinker. And what ended up happening is I let him go. I let the actual guy that, when we went back and looked through data, that proved to be tremendously better on paper than he was. But I let my instincts and my gut mislead me. And that was a very, very, very painful lesson to learn, because it wasn't a couple months later that we found out, again, you know, that this guy that we had working with us was stealing from us for years. Again, another thing I wouldn't have figured out unless I went through this benchmarking, process and remained consistent with it. All right, because everything can be measured in your business, right? All of it leads back, especially if you're properly set up. These will eventually give you a very good understanding of your business, and then you don't put the business at risk, right? The key here is not creating risk for the business. All right. You create risk by not knowing your numbers. The bigger you get, the harder it is to control. All right. If you don't have these things in the bedrock of your business, what's going to happen is you're going to learn through trial and error. And that's a very, very risky game to play, especially, again, as the stakes get higher. All right. If you want to do bigger and bigger projects, like, again, these things are what matters, right? People lie. You can have the wrong, impressions. You can be wrong. All right. Your numbers won't. The numbers don't lie. Okay. Properly put in, of course. Okay. So Again, we can measure our supply chain. A big thing with suppliers, as you become more dependent on them, so as you do more projects, okay, you have to learn that a supplier is the same as a subcontractor. All right. You will find that out very quickly as well as you do more and more volume, as the numbers move into the millions. All right. You have to know right away when a supplier is changing the game with you. And it starts off with little things. Okay. I've talked a lot about this. Most people don't believe me. They still have a great relationship with their suppliers. Would never imagine them raising the price on them because they haven't, bartered them down. They could never imagine sending jobs short purposely or leaving you, short material they don't report back. No supplier would ever do that. All right. Wait till you start measuring it and you'll find out. Okay. The busier you get with your suppliers, by the way, the more that they take these advantages. And again, I have a very neutral stance on this. If you'd asked me 10 years ago if this was going on, I would say probably not. All right. Today, I know damn well even the best of them are doing it. Okay. They make their monies off nickels and dimes. Okay. So if you're not capable of holding them accountable and they know that they can short order you or they can, not give you competitive prices, they're going to make their money on you. Their job is to do that. All right. Many of you guys I've talked to about rebate programs. All right. How many have ever been offered a rebate program from their supplier? No. You know why? Because you have to ask for it. They're not going to willingly give you that. Right now, if you went in and you negotiated a rebate program, I can almost promise you there's 2 to 3% on your account that you can immediately recover. All right. That's going to be a year-end rebate, 2 to 3%. Every supplier, almost all of them have it. It just goes off the gross of the buying thing, and you should be negotiating for those. Okay. Again, how do you go to a supplier and have leverage with them in a conversation if you don't know your numbers? If you don't know how many bad, how many bad deliveries they had, how many times they damaged customers' property, how many times there was a complaint, how many, times we, put in for orders and they were unable to fulfill them. Like, how do you have leverage with that supplier? Okay. Furthermore, again, when you start to have to compare a lot of suppliers and get the best price, and if you look at any of the top contractors, they're all doing it. All right. You'll start to realize like they have to work for your business. All right. Nothing. Did anyone here get anything for free? Anybody get anything easy? No, me either. All right. So don't make it easy for other people, right? Again, some of you that are material heavy, maybe it's 50, like in our revenue, it's like 50-50 basically labor material. All right. And we have tons of different suppliers. We have great relationships with them. There's a way to do it with finesse. All right. But I know for a fact that we're getting the best pricing. That's keeping me super competitive. All right. My time's being spent on that. I'm comparing, numbers. I've got a good system for knowing that I'm getting the best, most competitive rates. And we're constantly checking. All right. We don't trust anybody, nor should you. Right. We're in the post-trust era, remember, right? So again, checking these things and having a process in place that allows you not to to get into the weeds. This can be a VA, this can be many things, but you will save enormous amount of money and you will regain enormous amount of profit by looking at where your biggest bills are coming from. All right. And if we're not constantly trying to push those rates down, okay, then we're due to be we'll be taken advantage of at one point or another. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that you guys are being now, and maybe you've got it under control, but let's imagine for a second that you dramatically grow, 50% next year. All right. They raise the interest rates and all of a sudden there's a flood of work coming in. How are you going to know that that's being maintained? Right. Big difference, right? At the end of the day, when we look at our returns. So human resources, probably one of the most important places to look. And again, I don't know how many of you guys actually take this in as a financial control for the performance of your employees and staff. So I can't tell you how many times that I've worked with contractors, including myself. So I take accountability. I'm guilty of this, where I put all the focus into onboarding, great recruitment, great everything, thinking I'm giving the world to these guys. They're going to definitely be performing. Failed to measure it. Failed to measure it, and then complained about not making enough profit, not having enough money to, grow or expand the business, and continuously refusing to look at the facts that those people I have on my team aren't actually stars. I want them to be stars. And when I'm around, they're a star, but take me away and the numbers go to shit. All right. What's that tell you? And we avoid those hard decisions because we don't want to see those numbers. We don't, I mean, they're all available. They're all in front of you, right? If we have a system in place, I think a lot of owners wouldn't want to see the truth of it. All right. They wouldn't want to see, and you know where we would see it? We'd see it in the customer satisfaction rates. The amount of fraud that's going on, time card fraud. All right. That's another big indicator for us. We know who the thieves are. We know who the guy is that will steal an hour. And guess what? It's not always who you think it is. That's the unfortunate truth, right? When you start using numbers though, ahead of hiring somebody and really holding them accountable to those data-driven facts, all right. First of all, you're going to get less people that take advantage. All right. The first part of this is really preventing it from happening in the first place. All right. Because you can inadvertently turn somebody bad. All right. And I give you the easiest example of this. If you were to go to work every single day and there was no reward for doing a great job and there was no consequences for doing a bad job, what happens? You get stars out of that? No. So now if we put them in an environment where they know they're not getting any, like there's no room for them to steal from us. Okay. And not saying all of them, but I'm using that as a sharp word. Okay. So for example, we have 2 balances and checks for time clocks. Why? Because all it takes is guys stealing 15 to 20 minutes a day to make me 15 to 20% less profitable at the end of the year. That's it. That's all. Right. And how easy is it to do that? How easy is that to get baked into your culture? Oh, it's okay. Oh, it's okay. No problem. We're not. And you could still, everyone in their mind could think that they're still doing you a favor. That's the worst part of it all. All right. That they believe, all right, because you've allowed it, that they're doing you a favor and that they're the star and that you need them. Meanwhile, they're stealing from you, hundreds of thousands, setting the example for everybody else to do it. All the crews, again, this is contagious. So again, in terms of keeping it contained and having a business that truly can be operational without you and not go bankrupt, because that's obviously what we're all worried about. All right. We need to know very early on, and we need to have checks and balances in place. We have to have a standard way of measuring these things for each and every single role. Okay. Now, the good news, I'll share some good news with you. This is not something that you should personally be doing. You should be reviewing, but the first thing to get out of your hands, because we know it's overwhelming and our anxiety goes up and we're probably not the best at doing it, all right, is to, again, I use a VA completely unattached to my whole business. How about that? Completely, she has one job, one single job. All right. Most of my team doesn't even know she exists. And what is her job? To go back and analyze all of our numbers and make sure that these reports come back accurate. All right. For me, it's easy. Best, probably the highest ROI. Actually, I can say that the ROI is extremely high. She's about 46 times her wage for all the things she's caught. All right. And it's a very standard way. And it sets the example, it sets the tone that, hey, you know what? If you're going to come here and try and steal from us or not be competitive, we're going to find out quicker than you're going to try it. Right. So again, how many of you think you could run a better business if you knew these numbers? And again, without knowing the real balance of these, do you think that by knowing these numbers, we could start to fix the things in our business that are that actually manage, that actually are impacting our profits? Okay. And just checking, I know it might sound a little harsh, but what exactly is freedom in a business? Does anybody know?
Probably not having to be there to run it every day.
Right. My definition of freedom is exactly that, but it's the profit. Okay. Nobody has freedom if there's no profit, bottom line. Okay. And if you're willing to accept less profit for bad performance and for poor management, all right, then you will be stuck in your business forever. If you can't hold people accountable to maintaining a set of data set, right? Maintaining consistency, you will never grow your business. If you can't use a generally average person to do every single role in your business, you will never, ever have freedom. All right. And believe it or not, as you make these things more and more simpler, costs go down, overhead goes down. The burden of finding superstars and A players that are going to, propel your business to the next level, that goes down because that doesn't exist anymore. I mean, I'm still waiting for it. I'm not seeing it. I make stars, all right? I don't find stars. Does that make sense? Right?
Jay, you're such a badass.
Well, I have to be. My badassness
Yeah.
is from losing so many times that I don't care anymore. That's where you get to, right? So like again, a lot of times we take a way we want to see the world into business, all right? And it gets chewed up and spit out. That's exactly what's happened to me so many times is you be put through the grinder and banging your head against the wall of why, like I've done everything right. All right, but what's missing? What's missing? And again, the real aha moment for me that came, in a growth stage was realizing that everything can be tracked and measured. All right, when I fully committed to that, I stopped listening to what people told me. I stopped listening to what experts told me. I stopped listening to what my accountants and my bookkeepers told me. All right, I was prove it. Just prove it. Don't tell me anything. All right, you show me in the numbers. Tell me where it's happening. Explain it. Right? And things started to change. And the whole culture of the business changed because people knew you can't lie. You can't manipulate. You can't convince. And again, the worst is your sales team, right? I can't tell you the number of the times they still get me on stupid stuff, right? Like, I'll get a report back and immediately I'm going to see in my numbers that something's off. And their explanations are crazy, right? Just out of this world. Like, but at the end of the day, they know damn well I don't care what they tell me. I don't care what they say. I can't afford it, nor would I risk other people's futures and other people that rely on us on their interpretation of the world. That's meaningless to me. Either you do or you don't, right? Either you can or you cannot. When it comes down to it, and I'm held myself accountable to that. I made it clear to myself. And that's again where you start to see the true answers in your business. Everything else can be manipulated, right? Unfortunately, it's the truth. When you start to, really look at what matters and again, using your data to make decisions, clearing yourself of the distractions and the people that have a vested interest in decisions, you start to see the truth, right? As long as you're prepared to face the truth, because that's a very difficult thing as well. All right. That involves a lot of change when you start to figure these things out. Then, that's where you start to see your growth. Right. So I wanted to share this part of it because we're just getting ready to finish up our money pro AI, the management accounting process for level 1. So I hope you guys have been getting some value from what we've discussed. I hope you're going to put some of these things in practice. You'll notice every single tool that I've shared with you, they all connect. All right. So your job costing, your product mix, your 12-week budget, all of them are using the same things. All right. And then this is like the granddaddy of it. All right. Now, as we get a little bit more advanced, don't put pressure on yourself that you need to fill all this out. Okay. Take 1 or 2 things that matter at a time. All right. Not all of these things will be relevant. I mean, if you're not running big staff, you don't need a lot of these numbers. You won't need them yet, but we're going to keep our eyes on them, right? When you do, you'll know which one to measure. And as you start to implement things in our program, you're going to see that there's KPIs attached to it. Okay. Those KPIs come back to here. Make sense?
Yeah, I have a question. I mean,
Sure.
I love all these charts. I'm a checklist person. I like to be organized like this. What's overwhelming to me is putting all of this together. When do we fill these out? Monthly, weekly,
Right.
daily?
So
that's very overwhelming to me.
100%. And I'm glad you brought it up because Patty, you don't need to worry about that so much because we're implementing with you. And I don't expect you to just kind of out the gate know when and where. We have a schedule for it. So the first thing is to get the big picture view of what you want your business to look like, right? And again, you can take my perspective. I'm offering it to everyone here that nothing matters but the numbers. That's my position. Now there are people that would argue that, and they would say different to that. To which his own. I'm going to share with you what's worked with me, like I promised, and we're going to implement that exact system. So no matter where you're at in our program, from just starting out all the way up, we're going to be accountable to numbers, right? Because how else can I help you move you to the next level if I don't know these numbers and if we can't measure what we're actually implementing? Does that make sense?
huge, and you put me so at ease right now. So thank you for that, and thank you for everything you've done. Huge things for us already. So thank you.
No, I appreciate it. And, again, at the end of the day, I'm glad that you know, these are tough conversations and they are overwhelming. I knew that right away. Don't feel like we have to have these in. This is something you're going to grow in. You can't. This is a. If ever I'm going to say it, it's we're in a marathon. We're not in a race. Okay. And again, the more and more you start to take the pieces and get things actually done and implemented, you'll see the value of it, and you'll be able to do these things on your own. Right? You'll be able to say, hey, I want to fix this. This is how I'm going to do it. It's a process. Okay. So the other last thing that I wanted to kind of discuss before we go through some questions here is, you know, how many of us are actually doing a 3-month plan? Is anybody doing a 3-month like strategic plan? It's kind of a trick question. I know the answer. All right.
What do you mean?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Let me show you. Okay, so hold on. Get my thing together. So some of you that I've talked to know that I like to use the OKRs. Okay. Hopefully this is going to make it a little bit more practical. But essentially a strategic plan, and again, this is an example. It's not necessarily the one that I'll use with you guys. I use OKR, but it's always got to tie back to like, what are we actually going to focus on? Okay, so it's too hard to think 2 years in the future. All right, although we need to have indicators for where we want to be, we've got to have, you know, the you know, what our revenue should be at, what our gross profits at, gross margins, all these things matter. Okay. But it's really meant, if you're doing it properly, to help you to align and be very clear about the next 30, 60, and 90 days. Okay. So I'm going to be slowly working with some of you to introduce this. And the way I do it is I start with our key objective. That's our vision or goal. Okay. The vision and goal inside of a business, you know, those aren't going to change too dramatically, you know, from year to year. And it's really our kind of our starting spot. That's our end game. Okay. Below that, we want to kind of look at, you know, what we're weak at, what we're, you know, where our opportunities are, you know, how are we going to fulfill this this goal? All right. By being honest with ourselves. All right. Having a coach, having, you know, somebody to help you through this, and really kind of looking at, where do I need to focus? Because most of us are focusing on too many things. We have way too many things going on to actually move the needle in our business. All right. And that's just the reality. We're in the operation mode. You're not going to make it to the next stage with that, right? We have to reduce all of the stuff that doesn't have value and isn't going to bring us to a higher number. All right. If that's not increasing our hourly rate, then it better be increasing our profit. It better be increasing the equity in our company. Those are the things we need to attach ourselves to and focus on. All right. Easier said than done. Don't get me wrong. I know how difficult this is for a lot, but that's where we get to the purpose of why. Like, why are we doing these things? Where are we going to get the motivation to do more? All right. Where are we going to find that purpose for ourselves? And a lot of times for me, again, like I said, I want to go to the place I can trust the most. All right. Do we want to put that energy into a single employee, a single team? Probably not a good investment. Okay. And in fact, it's not a good form of leadership either within our team. So again, as we break down the OKRs, and each one of you within the program, we're going to be going through these. If we haven't already started in our first sprint, you'll notice everything I do is in 90 days cycles. All right. And it's going to be attached to, you know, ultimately what your revenue goals are, what our profit goals are, where we need to see the company to be able to look at as a success. Okay. And then we start to weed out, what are the things that aren't getting us to that point? Okay. What are the things in the next 3 months that we need to stop doing in order to focus on these things more? Okay. So a good example of this is if we're doing admin work, all right, the national average for an admin in the USA is $21.60 an hour. All right. If our hourly value to our business is $100 to $200 an hour, is that something that we're going to focus less on doing moving forward? financially. Does that make sense? If I could double your profits by just doing that, then let's do that, right? It also, again, when we look at it in this perspective, I had this conversation again. I'm going to use Nick because we had a call just before this call. But Nick, you're probably realizing very quickly, that you can't be doing certain tasks. Literally cannot be doing them, right? And that's what's keeping us stuck. If we don't change that, and we don't start to focus on moving ourselves away from the things that are taking our time or burning us up, we can't grow the business. All right. The business is a direct reflection of how you manage your time. Direct reflection. All right. If you have a business in chaos, if you have a business that's struggling to see numbers, that's how you've used your time in the last 90 days, I assure you. Okay. The more accountable we become to our time and the more accountable that we use these sort of pillars to manage our business, all right, you will find that you'll start to attract people that share the same beliefs, all right, that have the same values. You'll also, unfortunately, find out the people that don't like being tracked and don't like being held accountable, all of a sudden will disappear, all right? We have to be prepared for that as well. All right, Nick, I'm glad for you, though we probably won't have to go across that painful thing when you have a big 30-man team or a 40-man team and you realize that 3/4 of them have to be fired. I hope no one has to experience that. And it's all because of my bad habits. But I've come to that conclusion doing exactly what we're looking at in front of us. How about this? I realized that I needed to be fired. And I fired myself. That was probably the most empowering thing from it. And I also knew that person I replaced myself with was way better at doing it, and I hated him for it. I still hate him for it. I still don't like him personally as a human being. All right. He's just not my cup of tea. But at the end of the day, I could not have ever made that decision on my own. And I couldn't have made that decision without looking at real numbers that I could trust. All right. I didn't make that decision because of the way I felt, because I already told you how I felt. I didn't like him. I didn't like him in the interview. I didn't like the way he talked to me. I didn't like his accent. I didn't like anything about this person. In fact, he's the opposite of who I would have ever hired. And to this day, he still does a way better job than me. I did that only purely, I was able to put all those emotions and all that stuff beside because it didn't serve me. And I made the decision because he fit the role perfectly. All right. And he performed, and he continued to perform, and he continues to perform to this day in spite of me. All right. And he does a better job than I ever could have done in that operation role, unfortunately. And that's the truth. Right. So I had to fire me because I wasn't living up to the value that role played. Right. I wouldn't have hired me for $200 an hour to do it. Right. Make sense? And a lot of you guys, when you start to look at these things, and as we track them and as we go through your plans individually, all right, if we hold ourselves accountable to those things, I mean, you're going to be uncomfortable with some of the decisions that have to be made, but you'll be sure of them. All right. And I think all of us here are looking to make sure decisions, right? We don't want to take huge risks. All right. Risk's only good if we know that we have an unfair advantage in it. Okay. So I didn't mean it to be all a lecture. I just wanted to get this one kind of through and in front of everybody as we wrap up. I know it's kind of a hard one to digest, but we're going to expand on this. And as I start using more and more language going through these calls and working with you individually, you're going to start to kind of recognize what we're doing. It'll be a lot more clear for everyone, hopefully. All right. So let me ask, who has any questions about what we've been discussing or any input or feedback?
Well, I guess I have something.
Sure.
Once I I was angry a lot of the time and was mad at the team, but until I took inventory and did some self-excavation and realized where the accountability was, that was such a weight off my shoulders and hard for me to admit to myself, but it was a huge deal.
Very, very hard.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge, I think, for all of us, right? We don't want to admit when we're struggling with something. We don't want to believe, though, that we don't have it under control either, right? Or that we can't handle it. And I think a lot of us, eventually over time, you realize that, hey, you know what? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. In fact, it's the opposite. Because you keep telling yourself that you keep programming your head, to say, hey, I need to handle all this. I need to put this fire out. You're inadvertently, stomping on your own success, right? Sometimes we hold on to roles too because that's where we get validated from. I know I have. All right. I felt really great being the lead salesman and making all the sales. But you know what I did? I killed my whole sales team. I couldn't get A players because I didn't create enough opportunity for them. And that's where I get the phrase, I make stars rather than be a star. That's what I had to learn. And it was a hard lesson to learn, going through many years of, being the only guy that could sell a project and feeling like there's no good salespeople out there, when reality is that I needed to create that person. I needed to create the environment that would allow somebody to come in that wasn't me. All right. Because there's not a lot of people out there like you, right? You have your own unique qualities. And I realized as well, by the numbers again, that the longer I stayed in that role, the more money the company was losing, or the more freedom I was losing. It was leaking out of the role I was playing in the business. Right? Make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me. I maybe can't wait to fire myself, basically.
Well, and again, here's the thing. If you don't start putting in these financial, and these indicators, all right, the hardest thing to do is to leave a business and then have to go back and understand why it may not making the profit you want, right? So think about it as this is the only way that you can truly have that freedom that you're thinking about, right? We all want to have a business that operates without us. I mean, for good or for bad. Some of you, again, I hope every one of you guys make it there and that you get to have that moment. It's not all it's cracked up to be. Unfortunately, I'll be the realist with you. One of the saddest, most loneliest periods of my life were when my business no longer needed me. Right. And I found things to sabotage and try to be, because I no longer had any, I wasn't validated by anything. Right. So here I am. You can have all the money and you can have all the freedom you want. But if, none of your friends are going to the beach to hang out, what are you doing with your time? Right. That's how I became a coach. So, on top of that, it's the other things when we don't think about ahead of time that really matter, right? So we want this business that operates without us. Okay, great. Most of us are too much of a micromanager to allow that to happen, because what happens when one thing doesn't go right that you were expecting to go right? What is your reaction to that? Right? Are we going to be able to stand and be able to take the impact of watching someone fail in your business to teach them a lesson? How many of you have had that experience before? Okay. And I'm going to tell you that if you want to be a leader, you have to give up control. It might sound totally out there, but in order for us to be a leader, we have to have the ability to lead objectively, meaning here is the objective. I don't care how you get to it. Here's how I'm measuring it. Figure it out. All right. Because if I want to attract people that are better at doing the thing than I am, I can't put them in a situation where I'm standing over them and giving them tasks to do. All right. You can't be task based. Okay. What you have to be able to do is, again, know from your numbers if somebody's working out or not. All right. And be able to practice real leadership to be away from the business. Because if every time there's a real problem, they have to run to you, all right, then you don't really have a business that operates without you.
What do you mean? Yeah, you can't be task based, because aren't these tasks getting me to these numbers?
No. So again, the first layer of your business, all right, are like your staff, right? So your immediate employees, it goes on their pay scale. All right. So people that have certain personalities are generally better adaptive at being task based. So you do this, you do that. Think of your laborers. Okay. Then you hire a foreman, all right, that is capable of thinking on their own, making their own decisions. All right. So that's your first layer of management. Okay. Leadership and upper management are two different things. Okay. So a manager is meant to manage. Okay. I have a COO that operates the business. Okay. I can't go to him and be like, did you do this? Did you do that? Did you do this? Did you do that? You would just frustrate that person. What we have to do is set the objective. So my objective is, to reduce overhead 6.5% and increase sales 3.5% this quarter is my OKR. Okay. Now, as the ownership and as the investor, that's what my expectations are for my team. I give it to him, and we already have these measurements baked into the business, into the systems. You can't cheat them in our business. Like, you can't fake them. So then I'm using that data to hold them accountable. Did we hit the objective? Yes or no? So I don't need to be there. And basically they're racing against those KPIs. Does that make sense? So in that situation, it's too complex to try to be, you got to do this, you got to do that. And you'll give that up right away because that's time consuming. If you had to think of every task that could possibly come about, and your team can't self heal. Okay. So self heal is, I'm going to hire a real problem solver at a certain point and a certain scale in my business. And that problem solver has to have the tools and ability to look at these numbers as well and figure it out. Right. So that's what I mean by that. Yeah. And it's just, again, as you scale up your business, you'll start to hire people for more leadership and management. Make sense?
So how do you put the biggest fear is that we give these people the leeway to make those decisions and they make a terrible decision, and
Totally.
small companies can be turfed in a hurry, right?
So that's a great question. And I've been through this many times, is that you give them enough to make, okay, so and this is a leadership theory, like a leadership style. Okay. I only give them enough room, all right, to make a mistake I can afford them to make. All right.
Yeah, okay.
Now I'll pay for a mistake if it's going to get them quicker to the KPI I need them to. So for example, I have a hotshot sales manager that thinks he's a shit. All right. First thing I'm going to do, no problem. I'm not going to share with him the data. I'm going to ask him to generate himself and pretend like I don't know the numbers. And I'm going to see what he does. Okay. I'm going to put him in the deep end and see how he swims. All right. I do this many times. Let's see how you swim. All right. 9 times out of 10. All right. Within the first month, he's strung out. He's like borderline ready to quit. Like, because you can't keep up with it unless you're using your numbers. Okay. Now, in my back pocket, I know my numbers. All right. You see what I'm saying? Now, my expectation for him is that he comes in and implements that and manages the sales reps to their numbers. Okay. But he doesn't know that yet. He hasn't learned that yet. So if I'm moving someone up from a salesperson to a sales manager, you have to teach them that, but you can't tell them what to do. You can't train them what to do, unfortunately. I hate to say it, but you have to let them fail and then come in at the right time and give them, the support they need and lead them to the answer. Okay. Same thing with upper management. You stop trying to tell people what to do. I gave up on that. I let them make their own plan. Again, when I come to the objectives, right? But I always know the score. That's what I'm saying about having these numbers behind me. I know how bad I can let things get before they get better. Okay. So salespeople, like, they have 3 months. I know, like, listen, it's going to get worse. They're going to suck at sales in our system for the first little bit, 30, 60 days. But by 90 days, I better see the improvement. Right. And that's what I mean by using your numbers. And again, at the end of the day, not one person should be able to take out your whole business. If that's the case, then we haven't put enough controls in place and got the team to buy in on those yet.
Yeah.
Right? Make sense?
Makes sense.
Okay. So again, like I said, for a lot of us, this is really foreign. This is very different, and I don't expect it to be comfortable. Don't worry about having to implement. In fact, look at the things. That's all I really want you to kind of start to wrap your heads around. Do not try and track every single thing. Okay. You will drive yourself mad. All right. Or think about, how do I put all these systems in place? We're going to work it into each one of the processes that we're implementing. And generally what happens is at the end of it, like a 90-day quarter, that's where we can measure those numbers. But you won't see them until the second, about 180 days. You won't see the improvements. Okay. Because then you're using the numbers to actually, see the actual value of the improvement. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. All right. Is anybody have any other questions? Anything else they wanted to bring up? I appreciate everyone for hanging in there. I know, again, whenever these conversations are up, they're tough ones. So great job, guys. And we'll chat next week.
Thanks, Jay.
Bye.
Good weekend.
You too.